In the dead of night, when the stars seem to vanish and the world is consumed by shadow, ancient Slavic tribes gathered in trembling silence. They huddled together, torches flickering weakly against the oppressive darkness, as they whispered a name they feared to speak too loudly. Chernobog, the Black God, the Destroyer. This was no mere legend to them. Chernobog was real, a force so malevolent, so overpowering, that his very name was said to carry a curse. They believed he brought pestilence, famine, and war, an unstoppable tide of ruin that swept through the land, leaving nothing but desolation in its wake. They called him the god of darkness, the embodiment of chaos, the antithesis of life itself. But why? Why would an entire culture dedicate its rituals, its fears, and even its hopes to such a being? What were they so terrified of? And why do these stories, dismissed by modern scholars as mere superstition, resonate so powerfully across centuries? Perhaps it's because there's more to the story than we've been told. What if these myths aren't myths at all, but fragmented memories of something that truly happened? Something so extraordinary, so far beyond comprehension, that it could only be expressed through the language of gods and demons. Imagine this: villagers kneeling beneath a vast pitch-black sky, offering sacrifices not out of reverence but out of sheer desperation. Their prayers are frantic, their voices trembling as they beg for protection from something they can't explain. Not a natural force, not a human enemy, but an unknown power that came from the heavens, a power that defied everything they understood about the world. What if Chernobog wasn't just a god of darkness, but a visitor? An intruder from another realm, or perhaps another world entirely? Ancient texts describe his arrival in ways that sound eerily familiar to us now. Giants of black flame descending from the stars, machines that roared like thunder, and chariots of shadow tearing across the sky. Is it possible, just possible, that these accounts are not metaphorical, but literal? Could Chernobog have been part of something far more extraordinary than the human mind of that time could comprehend? Consider this. Across the ancient Slavic world, rituals dedicated to Chernobog were not just rare, they were secretive, shrouded in mystery and fear. There was a sense that these ceremonies weren't about worship in the traditional sense, but about appeasement. As if Chernobog wasn't a benevolent deity, but a force to be bargained with. What were they trying to prevent? And who, or what, were they really making these offerings to? The deeper you dig into the myth, the stranger it becomes. There are whispers in ancient chronicles of strange phenomena that coincided with Chernobog's feasts. Lights in the sky. Unexplained illnesses. Entire villages vanishing without a trace. One account speaks of a dark wind that swept through a settlement, leaving no survivors. The villagers who found the remains spoke of scorched earth and shadows that moved with purpose. Were these primitive attempts to describe natural disasters? Or are they records of encounters with something far more sinister, encounters we would now recognize as close encounters of another kind? If you think this sounds far-fetched, consider this. Throughout history, across cultures separated by oceans and continents, similar figures appear again and again. Gods of darkness, bringers of chaos, beings that come from the skies, leaving fear and devastation in their wake. From the Egyptian Set to the Norse Loki, from Hindu Kali to the Mayan Kamazats, the pattern is unmistakable. Could Chernobog be one piece of a global puzzle? A puzzle that points to a shared origin for these myths? What are we really looking at here? Is it possible that these stories of gods and demons are actually the distorted memories of encounters with beings beyond our understanding? Beings that came to Earth long ago, leaving an indelible mark on the human psyche? And if so, what does that mean for the history we think we know? Chernobog's name has been buried, his rituals erased, his mythology reduced to a footnote. But what if that erasure wasn't accidental? What if someone, or something, wanted to hide the truth? Think about it. Why do certain myths endure while others are silenced? Why do ancient symbols and stories of celestial visitors resurface in unrelated cultures across the globe? And why even now does the idea of Chernobog, the black god, send a shiver down the spine? Could it be that these myths are more than stories? Could they be warnings? Messages from our ancestors trying to tell us about something they experienced firsthand? By the end of this journey, you might not look at mythology the same way again. Because when you strip away the centuries of interpretation, the layers of metaphor and symbolism, what you're left with is a question that refuses to be ignored. What if Chernobog was real? And what if he wasn't a god at all, but something far more terrifying? Picture this: an ancient forest, vast and untamed, stretching endlessly into the horizon. The trees are gnarled and towering, their branches interwoven to blot out the sun. Beneath this canopy of eternal twilight lies the domain of Chernobog. The air is thick, heavy with a silence that feels alive, broken only by the rustling of unseen creatures. It was here, in the deepest recesses of the Slavic wilderness, that the people believed Chernobog's presence was strongest. They called him the Black God, but his role was not one of creation or compassion. He was chaos incarnate, a bringer of destruction whose touch could blight crops, sicken livestock, and sow discord among people. His presence was feared, his name avoided in casual conversation as though speaking it might draw his attention. Yet, for all their terror, the people of these ancient tribes understood something profound. Darkness is not just the absence of light. It is a force, a necessary balance in a world where creation and destruction walk hand in hand. The myths tell us that Chernobog was the counterpart to Perun, the god of thunder and light. Where Perun brought life-giving rain, Chernobog brought drought. Where Perun defended order, Chernobog unleashed chaos. Together, they represented the eternal struggle between opposites, a duality woven into the fabric of existence itself. But unlike Perun, whose stories are filled with heroism and divine justice, the tales of Chernobog carry a more sinister tone. His actions were not acts of balance but of malice, as though his very purpose was to remind humanity of its fragility. One of the most chilling rituals associated with Chernobog was known as the Feast of Shadows. According to legend, this ceremony was held during the longest nights of winter, when the sun seemed to vanish from the sky, leaving the world at the mercy of darkness. Villagers would gather in utter silence around a single fire, their faces pale and drawn. They believed that even a whispered word could invite Chernobog's wrath. Offerings were made, grain, livestock, sometimes more, to appease the black god and ensure the return of the light. But it wasn't just silence and sacrifices that defined the Feast of Shadows. Some accounts describe visions seen during these rituals, glowing orbs descending from the sky, casting an unnatural light over the gathering. Others speak of shadows that moved independently, flickering and shifting as though alive. The most disturbing stories tell of figures, tall, dark, and indistinct, emerging from the forest to stand among the villagers. These beings, described as giants wreathed in black fire, did not speak or move but watched in eerie stillness. What were these visions? Hallucinations brought on by fear, the overactive imaginations of a superstitious people? Or were they something far more tangible, something that modern terminology might describe as extraterrestrial encounters? The coincidences are hard to ignore. Text from the region described Chernobog's chariot as a vehicle blacker than the night, lit with fire at its edges and moving without sound. Some depictions of the black god show him not as a humanoid figure, but as a mass of swirling darkness with piercing, unnatural eyes. And then there are the accounts of disappearances. Entire villages found abandoned, with no sign of struggle or explanation. One story tells of a hunter who stumbled upon a settlement that had been reduced to ash. The surrounding forest was untouched, yet the ground within the village boundary was scorched and barren, as though something had swept through it, obliterating everything in its path. Could these tales be describing encounters with advanced technology? Machines and beings so incomprehensible to the people of the time that they could only interpret them as divine or demonic? And if so, why did they associate these phenomena with Chernobog? Was he merely a symbol onto which they projected their fears, or was there a direct connection between the black god and these inexplicable events? Even more intriguing are the patterns that emerge when comparing Chernobog's myth to similar stories from other cultures. The imagery of the Feast of Shadows, the eerie lights, the towering figures, the offerings to appease a destructive force, parallels myths from ancient Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, and even early China. In each case, the narrative is the same: beings from above, descending in fire and darkness, demanding reverence or submission. What did these ancient people experience that inspired such similar stories across vast distances and cultural divides? And why did they all describe these visitors as both divine and terrifying? In the Slavic tradition, the Feast of Shadows marked a turning point in the year, a time of transition when the barriers between worlds were said to thin. Could it be that the rituals performed during these nights were more than just superstition? Were they attempts to communicate with something or someone on the other side? And if so, what was the message? The more you explore the legend of Chernobog, the more it feels like a puzzle, each piece hinting at a greater truth hidden beneath the surface. A truth that challenges our understanding of history, mythology, and the very nature of the divine. Chernobog's shadow stretches far beyond the borders of ancient Slavic lands. His story, as ominous and perplexing as it is not an isolated phenomenon. Across the globe, in cultures separated by oceans, mountains, and millennia, we find echoes of the Black God. Different names, different faces, but the same haunting themes: chaos, destruction, and an uncanny connection to the heavens. Consider the Egyptian Set, a god of storms, chaos, and disorder. Like Chernobog, Set was feared for his destructive power, often portrayed as an outsider, a being whose very presence disrupted the natural order. The Egyptians described Set's battles against Horus as cosmic struggles, conflicts that mirrored the eternal push and pull between light and darkness. But there's a peculiar detail in some of Set's myths, a recurring mention of foreign invaders associated with his name. Scholars have long assumed this referred to human enemies, but what if it wasn't? What if foreign meant something far more alien, something not of this earth? And then there's Loki of Norse mythology, a trickster, a shapeshifter, and above all, an agent of chaos. Loki, like Chernobog, exists on the fringes of his pantheon, a figure both feared and essential, whose actions often bring destruction but also transformation. In the myths of Ragnarok, Loki's role is clear. He heralds the end of the world, leading a horde of fire giants from Muspelheim to set the heavens ablaze. Fire giants, beings of immense power, descending from the skies. The parallels to Chernobog's giants of black flame are hard to ignore. But perhaps the most striking parallel comes from Hindu mythology, where the goddess Kali represents a force both destructive and creative. Like Chernobog, Kali embodies the terrifying necessity of destruction as a prelude to renewal. And yet, in the ancient Vedic texts, there are curious mentions of celestial events associated with Kali's dances, descriptions of blinding lights, deafening sounds, and upheavals that feel oddly mechanical, almost technological. Could these stories, like those of Chernobog, be remnants of encounters with something far beyond the understanding of ancient humans? This pattern, the recurring theme of dark, chaotic deities connected to celestial phenomena, can't be dismissed as mere coincidence. Across the Americas, the Maya spoke of Kamazats, a bat-like god of darkness who descended from the sky to demand blood sacrifices. The ancient Chinese feared Gong, a serpent-like figure who brought chaos by tilting the heavens. The Polynesians told tales of Maui, who could harness the power of the sun, but whose exploits often brought unintended destruction. And then there's the symbol of the black sun, an image that appears in cultures spanning continents. In Slavic carvings, it represents Chernobog's power, a swirling void of darkness. But the same symbol appears in Mesoamerican artifacts, in Egyptian tombs, and even in ancient Tibetan manuscripts. How is it that civilizations with no known contact share not just similar myths but identical symbols? One answer, tantalizing yet controversial, is that these myths may have a common origin, not in human imagination, but in shared experiences. Experiences with beings or forces that once visited Earth, leaving an indelible mark on every culture they encountered. What if Chernobog, Set, Loki, Kali, and the rest are not different gods, but different interpretations of the same phenomenon? And what if that phenomenon wasn't divine at all, but extraterrestrial? Look closely at the myths, and you'll see the clues. Descriptions of black suns that darkened the sky. Accounts of fire descending from the heavens. Symbols that match astronomical events or advanced technology far beyond the capabilities of ancient civilizations. These aren't the inventions of primitive minds. They're records, distorted over time but still carrying the echoes of something extraordinary. There's one detail that keeps resurfacing, no matter the culture or the myth: the connection to eclipses. Many of these dark deities, including Chernobog, were associated with the moments when the sun vanished and the world was plunged into shadow. Ancient peoples feared these events, but they also revered them, often tying them to their gods. Could this be a clue? Were eclipses not just natural phenomena, but moments when these beings made their presence known? The evidence isn't just mythological. Archaeological discoveries have uncovered symbols of the black sun etched into stone in places as far apart as Siberia, Peru, and China. In some cases, these carvings are accompanied by depictions of humanoid figures with elongated heads or strange, otherworldly features. Are these simply artistic expressions, or ancient records of visitors who once walked among us? The stories connect in ways that defy explanation. Across the globe, they tell of beings who came from the heavens, brought both chaos and knowledge, and then disappeared, leaving humanity to grapple with their memory through myth. Chernobog may be just one name among many, but his legend is part of a larger tapestry, one that hints at a shared history buried beneath millennia of storytelling. If these myths are indeed fragments of the same truth, what does that mean for our understanding of the past? And what might it reveal about the forces that shape the world we live in today? What if Chernobog wasn't a god at all? What if the ancient Slavs, in their desperation to explain the unexplainable, mistook something far more advanced, far more otherworldly, for a deity? It's a question that gains unsettling weight when you examine the evidence through the lens of the ancient astronaut theory. This controversial hypothesis suggests that the gods of mythology weren't gods in the spiritual sense, but visitors, beings from distant planets or dimensions who arrived on Earth long before recorded history. Their advanced technology, so far beyond the comprehension of early humans, would have seemed indistinguishable from magic. Could Chernobog have been one of them? Consider the strange descriptions of Chernobog's supposed manifestations. Ancient texts speak of his arrival in a chariot of shadow, a vehicle that moves silently through the night sky, radiating a dark light at its edges. How would a pre-modern society interpret something like a spacecraft? Without the vocabulary or understanding to describe propulsion systems or advanced machinery, they might call it a chariot or a celestial vessel, shrouded in the only metaphor they knew. And what of the giants of black flame said to appear during the Feast of Shadows? Witnesses describe these beings as towering, indistinct forms radiating heat and light. Could this be an early account of extraterrestrial visitors clad in some form of protective suit, or shielded by energy fields? Or perhaps machines, intelligent constructs designed to interact with humanity on behalf of their creators? The coincidences don't stop there. In Archime, a site often referred to as Russia's Stonehenge, archaeologists uncovered carvings that defy easy explanation. Among these are humanoid figures with elongated heads, massive eyes, and what appear to be strange devices in their hands. Skeptics call them artistic interpretations or exaggerated human forms, but others see something more. Could these carvings represent visitors who came to Earth in the distant past, leaving an indelible mark on the culture and mythology of the time? And then there's the question of rituals. The offerings made to Chernobog, the grain, the livestock, the silence itself, carry an eerie resemblance to the kinds of protocols one might imagine for attempting communication with advanced beings. If these visitors demanded not worship but compliance, would the ancient Slavs have interpreted this as divine wrath? Were their sacrifices not acts of faith, but desperate attempts to placate something they could neither resist nor understand? Some accounts go even further, suggesting that Chernobog's rituals may have been more than symbolic. Certain Slavic myths speak of nights when the villagers themselves would vanish, taken into the forest as offerings. What happened to them? Did they flee into the wilderness, consumed by their own terror? Or were they taken, removed by beings who required something far more valuable than material wealth? Even more provocative are the parallels between these stories and modern accounts of UFO encounters. Bright lights descending from the sky, strange machines hovering in silence, people disappearing without a trace. These aren't just elements of ancient mythology. They're the hallmarks of what we now call alien abductions. Is it possible that Chernobog wasn't a god at all but an ancient visitor? A being who arrived on Earth for reasons we can only guess at, whether to study, to guide, or perhaps to manipulate humanity? And if so, what were the consequences of his presence? Did he shape the course of human history in ways we've only begun to uncover? The deeper you go, the more questions arise. Why do these accounts persist across cultures and millennia, always cloaked in the language of gods and demons? And why does the idea of celestial visitors, whether they come in fire and shadow or chariots of light, seem to resurface in every corner of the globe? Could it be that these myths are part of a larger truth, one deliberately obscured by time and interpretation? And if we begin to see Chernobog as more than a myth, what does that mean for the other gods of antiquity? Were they all visitors, misunderstood by the people they encountered? Were they builders of civilizations, destroyers of worlds, or something in between? And perhaps most chillingly, if they came once, what's to say they won't come again? If Chernobog's myth is more than a simple tale of a malevolent god, what clues might have been left behind, hidden in plain sight? Across history, symbols of darkness and power have appeared in the most unexpected places, on ancient carvings, in ritual chants, and even in the iconography of secretive groups. Could these symbols be fragments of a lost knowledge, preserved through the ages by those who understood Chernobog's true significance? One of the most striking connections is the black sun, a mysterious symbol found across cultures, often associated with esoteric and occult practices. To the Slavs, the black sun was a representation of cosmic balance, a force that governed both creation and destruction. But its imagery extends far beyond Slavic mythology. The same symbol has appeared in ancient Mesopotamian tablets, Mayan carvings, and even in the cryptic rituals of European secret societies. Why would such a specific symbol reappear in such disconnected civilizations? Some researchers believe the black sun is more than a metaphor. They suggest it could be a representation of an astronomical phenomenon, or even a gateway. Think about it. Ancient cultures often encoded their knowledge in symbols, embedding astronomical insights into their myths and rituals. Could the black sun have been a depiction of a celestial event witnessed by early humans? Or was it something even stranger, like a portal to another dimension, or a phenomenon tied to the arrival of extraterrestrial beings? The Nazis certainly thought so. During World War II, the Thule Society, a secretive organization deeply entrenched in Nazi ideology, embraced the black sun as a symbol of hidden power. They believed it was connected to ancient truths, truths that could unlock unparalleled technological and spiritual advancement. Their obsession with this symbol led them to scour the globe in search of relics and artifacts, including rumored expeditions to Slavic regions once tied to Chernobog's worship. Why would a modern regime, armed with cutting-edge science, dedicate itself to uncovering the secrets of an ancient myth? Did they suspect that Chernobog's legend was rooted in something real? And if so, what did they hope to gain? Even more curious is the connection between Chernobog and archaeoastronomy. Slavic sites believed to be associated with his worship, such as Archime, have been found to align with celestial events like solstices and eclipses. This level of precision suggests a deep understanding of the stars, an understanding that seems out of place for a supposedly primitive society. How did the ancient Slavs develop such advanced astronomical knowledge? Was it simply the result of careful observation, or was it taught to them by someone, or something, far more advanced? Then there are the chants and spells associated with Chernobog, many of which have survived in fragmented forms. Scholars dismiss them as poetic expressions of fear, but closer analysis reveals patterns, repetitions of sounds and phrases that some believe could encode mathematical or astronomical information. Could these rituals have been more than desperate pleas for protection? Were they a form of communication, an attempt to reach out to the beings they believed represented Chernobog? Theories become even more tantalizing when you consider the possibility of encoded knowledge. What if the myth of Chernobog wasn't just a warning, but a message? A set of instructions or insights buried in folklore waiting to be uncovered? If so, who was the intended recipient? Future generations of humanity, or the very beings who inspired the myth in the first place? And this raises a deeper, darker question. Has this knowledge been deliberately hidden? Throughout history, stories of Chernobog and similar deities have been suppressed, their symbols erased, their rituals condemned. The Christianization of Slavic lands saw the destruction of countless pagan artifacts, many of which were tied to Chernobog's worship. Was this an effort to extinguish paganism, or to bury evidence of something much more profound? In the modern era, this pattern continues. Artifacts tied to Chernobog have mysteriously disappeared from museums and archives. Archaeologists working on Slavic sites have reported strange occurrences, equipment failures, unexplained sightings, even a chilling sense of being watched. Is it mere coincidence, or could there be a concerted effort to keep the truth hidden? These symbols and rituals aren't just relics of the past. They're clues, breadcrumbs leading us towards something larger, something that defies the limits of human understanding. If we can decode their meaning, we might unlock a secret that has been guarded for centuries. But the question remains, who is guarding it and why? Chernobog's story, like so many others from the ancient world, has been buried, not just by time, but by deliberate efforts to erase it. The Christianization of the Slavic lands marked the beginning of this suppression. Pagan gods were demonized, their names stricken from records, their rituals outlawed. Temples were destroyed, sacred sites were repurposed, and the stories of deities like Chernobog were rewritten or lost entirely. But why? Why go to such lengths to silence the mythology of a dark god, especially one so feared that his name was rarely spoken? Was it simply part of the broader campaign to convert a pagan world, or was there another reason, one hidden beneath the surface? Consider this. Throughout history, there have been curious disappearances of artifacts, manuscripts, and even entire archaeological sites connected to Chernobog and other enigmatic figures. During the Soviet era, reports emerged of secretive expeditions to places like Arkheim, where mysterious symbols and carvings were said to depict celestial events and otherworldly beings. These findings were never made public. Official explanations described these missions as routine research, but rumors persisted of objects being removed, sealed away in undisclosed locations. What were they trying to hide? Were these artifacts merely remnants of ancient superstition, or did they point to something more profound, evidence of contact with forces beyond our understanding? It isn't just the Soviets. Throughout Europe, whispers of similar suppression emerge. In the 19th century, a manuscript known as the Chronicle of the Black Sun was said to have surfaced in Bohemia. This document allegedly described rituals dedicated to Chernobog, along with accounts of celestial visitors whose descriptions matched modern interpretations of extraterrestrials. The manuscript disappeared soon after its discovery, confiscated by authorities under the pretense of containing dangerous heresies. It has never been seen again. Even today, there are questions about who controls the narrative of our ancient past. Archaeologists who suggest alternative interpretations, those that veer into the realm of extraterrestrial influence, often face ridicule or professional ruin. Their work is dismissed as pseudoscience, their findings ignored or deliberately discredited. But isn't that itself suspicious? Why is this line of inquiry so vehemently opposed? Could it be that the truth, if revealed, would challenge the very foundations of our understanding of history, religion, and the origins of humanity? The suppression extends beyond academia. Popular culture often portrays figures like Chernobog as simple villains, reducing their complexity to caricature. But what if this oversimplification serves a purpose? By relegating these stories to the realm of fantasy, are we being conditioned to dismiss them, to ignore their deeper implications? And then there are the conspiracies about secret societies. Groups like the Thule Society, rumored to have been obsessed with symbols of the Black Sun, a motif tied directly to Chernobog in Slavic lore, have long been accused of guarding esoteric knowledge. Were these societies preserving ancient truths that were too dangerous, or too transformative, for the general public? Ask yourself this: who benefits from keeping these stories hidden? From dismissing Chernobog as mere myth? If the truth about his origins were known, if the connection to extraterrestrial visitors or advanced ancient civilizations were confirmed, what would that mean for the institutions that have built their power on established narratives? It's not just about Chernobog. This is part of a larger pattern, one that suggests a concerted effort to control what we know about our past. Pieces of the puzzle are missing, deliberately withheld, leaving us with fragments of a story that, when viewed in its entirety, could alter everything we think we know. The suppression of Chernobog's story isn't just an erasure of mythology. It's the silencing of a possible truth. A truth that may hold the key to humanity's origins, our connection to the cosmos, and the forces that have shaped our world from the shadows. And if there's one thing history teaches us, it's this: the most dangerous truths are always the ones kept hidden. Of course, not everyone is convinced by the idea that Chernobog, or any ancient deity, was more than a myth. Skeptics argue that stories like these are nothing more than the products of imagination and fear, shaped by the human need to explain the inexplicable. To them, Chernobog is a symbol, a personification of chaos and darkness, created by a culture that struggled to survive in an unpredictable and often hostile world. Historians point out that myths often reflect natural phenomena or psychological archetypes. The long, harsh winters of the Slavic region could have inspired tales of a god whose domain was darkness and cold. The sacrifices? A desperate attempt to bring order to chaos, to feel some sense of control in a world ruled by forces beyond human comprehension. And those strange lights in the sky, the shadowy figures, the disappearances. Could they not have been exaggerations, born of fear and passed down through generations until the truth was lost beneath layers of legend? Archaeologists, too, offer plausible explanations. The so-called chariots of shadow could be interpreted as meteorological phenomena, such as rare forms of lightning or eclipses, misunderstood and mythologized by ancient peoples. The elongated heads on carvings at sites like Archaim might not depict extraterrestrials, but instead reflect ritualistic practices, such as cranial binding, which was common in many ancient cultures. And yet, for all their insistence on rational explanations, mainstream scholars can't answer every question. How do they explain the uncanny similarities between Chernobog's myth and other legends from across the globe? Why do symbols like the Black Sun appear in civilizations that had no known contact with one another? And why are so many of these myths tied to celestial events or beings descending from the sky? When skeptics dismiss these connections, one has to wonder, are they being cautious, or are they clinging to a narrative that feels safer, more comfortable? After all, history is filled with examples of ideas once considered absurd that turned out to be true. The discovery of Troy, the realization that the Earth revolves around the sun, even the existence of deep-sea creatures once thought mythical. Each of these breakthroughs required questioning the status quo. But here's the thing: skepticism isn't just about doubt. It's also about curiosity, about the willingness to ask hard questions and follow the evidence wherever it leads. And when it comes to Chernobog, the evidence doesn't lead to easy answers. What if the reluctance to entertain alternative theories isn't about science, but about control? If the story of Chernobog and his possible connection to ancient visitors challenges the dominant narratives of history and religion, doesn't it make sense that such ideas would be suppressed, dismissed, or ridiculed? After all, the truth has always been a dangerous thing, especially when it threatens the structures of power. It's worth asking, Who decides what counts as myth and what counts as history? Who gets to control the narrative of our past? And why do they so often insist that the stories of gods, celestial beings, and advanced technology are nothing more than primitive fantasies? Maybe it's easier to dismiss these ideas than to confront what they might mean. Maybe the very act of questioning is what makes them uncomfortable. Or maybe, just maybe, the skeptics are right. But what if they're not? Chernobog, a name whispered in fear, a figure shrouded in darkness, a god, or something else entirely? His story has taken us from the shadowed forests of ancient Slavic lands to the edges of human understanding, where mythology and reality blur into one. We've uncovered tales of terrifying rituals, mysterious lights in the sky, and beings described in ways that echo modern accounts of extraterrestrial encounters. We've explored parallels to other dark deities across the globe and questioned whether Chernobog was part of a larger narrative, one that connects ancient myths to a cosmic truth hidden in plain sight. And yet, for all we've uncovered, the questions remain. If Chernobog wasn't a god, what was he? A visitor from another world? A misunderstood force of nature? Or something even stranger, a being whose existence challenges the very framework of how we see the universe? And what about the suppression of his story? The deliberate erasure of his myth, the vanishing artifacts, the unspoken truths buried under centuries of dogma and denial. Who decides which stories are told and which are forgotten? And why does it seem like the darkest myths are the ones that linger just out of reach, as if daring us to uncover their secrets? Perhaps Chernobog's legend is more than a myth. Perhaps it is a piece of a greater puzzle, one that stretches back to the dawn of humanity and reaches far beyond the stars. What would it mean if we truly understood it? If we unlocked the knowledge that our ancestors, in their fear and reverence, tried so desperately to preserve? The answers might not be comforting. They might shatter our perceptions of history, religion, and our place in the cosmos. But isn't that exactly why they matter? The most profound truths are often the ones that force us to confront the unknown, to step into the darkness and see what lies beyond. So, as you leave this story behind, consider this. What other truths are waiting in the shadows, hidden in the myths we dismiss and the mysteries we ignore? What else have we forgotten, or been made to forget? And what will it take to finally uncover it? The shadows of Chernobog stretch across time, but they aren't impenetrable. If you dare to look closely, you might find that the darkness isn't the end, it's just the beginning.